Hare Krishna Prabhu, just regarding the exam.
Yep, for sure.
What what questions we have to prepare, like whatever is there in the handbook?
Yeah. So all of the closed book questions.
Okay. So the exam format will be all those questions, or multiple? I mean, I don't know. Like here they said like there are 2 or 3 different sections of.
Yeah. So all of the open book questions, none of those will be asked. The questions will basically all be from the closed book question section. For the later ones, I'll also include learning outcomes, and I'll ask some of those. But for these ones, it will just be the closed book questions.
Okay.
So they're pretty straightforward if you've seen them in the.
Yes.
Yeah. Then they're not too hard. The level that we learn to in Bhakti-śāstrī is higher than the actual questions, if that makes sense. So
and that's what I felt, Prabhu, because some of the questions is like one word answer or one liner answer. That's kind of questions it was. Like then I was thinking, do we have to really elaborate the answer when it comes to
Purnachandra Goswami says that the students will be disappointed at how easy the closed book tests are. So you'll that's how easy it will be. Yeah, so no one needs to stress about those. They're all very short answers. I remember when I was doing mine, I finished all of my tests in like half the time they gave, because it was just so straightforward. They're designed for you to pass.
Okay, so we don't need to really like the academic studies. We don't need to really fill the pages to get the marks.
No, not like that. With the open book, I'm a little bit like that. The open book's probably the hardest.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah. So yeah, the open book is difficult, but the closed book is where you get your easy marks. So if you fail, you really suck. I don't know if I go that far. Maybe you just had a bad day. Okay. Om Jnanatimidandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadama Yam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Utapad Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghanathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jigatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrinda Vaneshwari Vrishabhanu Suti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratushe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so, and just on the note of that, I just asked that because I think many people hopefully are thinking about the closed book test. Definitely get your shlokas down. That's what I can say. I've been saying that the whole time. That's the main thing. Closed book test, you can even, I wouldn't recommend it, but even the day before, you can just go through it. We'll probably do a session here. I'll split us all into groups, and we can all in groups run through the closed book questions together before the test. And then together you can all chip in the answers. They're pretty straightforward. Okay, so if Mrugank Prabhu can share his screen, we'll keep on going with chapter 4. Okay, yes, I was a bit confused. Okay, yeah. So we will keep on going with chapter 4 as we sort of, I don't want to say last week was tangential, but we sort of focused a lot on one point in chapter 4. So now we're going to get back into the flow of the chapter itself. Now, last week we discussed how Krishna, he was speaking about the parampara, right? And he was speaking about how, well, the parampara had been lost, right? And then so we spoke about the nature of the parampara, the nature of knowledge, and how the parampara is not just something that faces backwards, but also something that faces forwards. We discussed all of these things, but I don't want to focus on them too much because, well, yeah, I think it was relatively well encapsulated last week. Instead, now we will continue with the actual flow of chapter 4. We will hopefully in this half complete this first hour. We will complete the first half of chapter 4, and then the next hour we'll do an activity or two and finish the last half of chapter 4. So after having had said all of this, discussing the parampara and all, we know that Arjuna, he asked the question, param bhavato janma, param janma vivasvataha katham me tad vijaniyam tvam madao proktavaniti, right? Vivasvan is older than you. How are we to understand that in the beginning you instructed this science to him, right? Krishna, you don't look old enough. Krishna, I know you're my relative, and being my relative, you can't be old enough. Not only that, but if you are the one teaching the gods, teaching the demigods, then who can teach the demigods but God himself, right? So interesting, right? Lots of confusions. And as we discussed, Arjuna is not legitimately confused, we can say. Arjuna understands very well that this is the supreme personality of Godhead in front of him. Instead, he's doing this for the sake of all of the atheistic people, right? So Krishna can now have the opportunity, right, to clarify his true nature. Not only that, he's also doing this for the sake of himself and all of the devotees who love to hear about Krishna. I'm pretty sure I said it earlier, but there's not a running joke, but it's a sort of repeating comment that gets joked about that when devotees study Bhakti-śāstrī, chapters 1 to 6, we sort of want to get them done as soon as possible. Then 7 to 12, we'll want to spend all of the time we can in. And then the last few chapters, we'll rush through until we get to chapter 18, right? Because we like to hear about Krishna, right? As fun as all of the karma kanda and everything is, at the end of the day, we want to hear about Krishna's pastimes and everything, right? And so Arjuna, he's suffering the same sort of thing. And he's saying this to have an opportunity to have Krishna to speak about himself. Because, as we know, Krishna, well, he's polite enough to not discuss about himself unless asked. Okay, so then we've heard this. And then now Krishna, he replies with text 5. And before we get to that, actually, I just want to quickly discuss a quick thing from text number, well, I'll ask you all. So we've heard, right, about the whole parampara and all, and now we're hearing that Arjuna is going to be included in it. What are the two qualities? Who can tell me what are the two qualities that have allowed Arjuna to become part of this parampara, to understand this rahasya, this secret? Who can tell me? Friend to Krishna. Yes, that's one.
He accepted Krishna as his guru.
Yes, that's already been done. That's very good. That's very good. So we can include that. That's a throwback to 227, I think. So we can say that that's from 2.7. That's not part of the two that I wanted to list, but that's definitely another one. So we could say there's 3 qualities. But there's
Complete
2 that Krishna
surrender?
specifies. Sorry?
Complete surrender?
Yes. So in text 4.3, Krishna mentions 2 things. They're very closely related. Friend to Krishna and
devotee.
yes. There we go. So we hear yoga prukta puratanaha bhakto sime sakha cheti, right? So bhakto sime is you are my devotee, and sakha cheti is well, sakhacha is and you are also my friend. You are my devotee and my friend. You know, bhakta and sakha, right? And so here we find a wonderful mention of the word bhakti, right? This is a very substantial and important word, as we all may know. So these are the two qualifications, right, which qualify Arjuna to understand what? The rahasyam, the mystery, the secret, right, that is passed through the parampara, right? This knowledge, even though we freely distribute it, actually the depths of it are very, very profound, and therefore they're referred to as a rahasya, right? The parampara is passing down very intimate and secret knowledge. So because of this, Arjuna is qualified to hear the knowledge. And what is that knowledge? Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Bahuni me vyatitani janmani tavacharjuna tanyaham veda sarvani natvam veta parantapa. Let's have Bhumi-gītā Mataji. Would you like to read out the English?
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. The personality of Godhead said, many, many births both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy. Hare Krishna.
Yes. Hare Krishna. Very nice. So now we are making a distinction, right? Krishna is saying, because one might wonder, right? How would Krishna be any different than anyone else? Because Arjuna, right? Arjuna also has had many, many births. But Krishna is clarifying, you can remember them. I mean, I can remember them, but you cannot. And so we find that there is a distinction being made, right, between the incarnation of the Supreme Lord and the incarnation of the Jiva, the individual living entity. And this distinction is a very important one, because this, I would say, is the whole nature of this whole half of the fourth chapter. Here, Krishna, he is distinguishing his action, his behavior, to regular action and regular behavior. We can often wonder the question, how can the unmoved mover, right? This is a very common Greek way of defining God. How can the unmoved mover move, right? What causes the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has everything, what causes him to do anything, right? These days, anyone who does anything does it because they need something, but Krishna needs nothing, so why does he move? All of these sort of topics are delved into here. Krishna, he is defining, what does it mean for God to walk? What does it mean for God to sing? What does it mean for God to dance, right? What does it mean for God to do activity? And that's what we'll hear in the 9th text, Janma karma chame divyam, right? If we understand truly the birth and activities of the Supreme Personality, well then we'll have a good destination, as we will discuss when we get there. So this distinction is a key distinction. What is the nature of activity? And then as the chapter goes on, it talks about, well, how do humans act on that activity? Can we transcend our material activities and act on the similar platform as Krishna does? Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I just wanted to give you all an idea of the trajectory we're going in. So Krishna says he has many births, as had Arjuna, but they are distinctively different. Why? Because Krishna is his body, right? Krishna, he is not having rapidly changing bodies as the spirit souls going through reincarnation are, right? Krishna is his body, and therefore there is no difference between him and his body, and therefore he remembers all of it, right? Because how can we say that he would forget any of it? Because he's not leaving anybody, right? Krishna, he is absolute. This is one thing that we can never forget, right? Krishna's qualities are Krishna. Krishna is his qualities and his qualities are him. Krishna's name, right, is himself and he is his name. His pastimes are himself and he is his pastimes. All of these things are very transcendentally hard to grasp, but they are true. Krishna, even though he appears to be very complex, is very simple. He is simply just Krishna. It is unlike us, where there is a distinction between our souls and our body. As Prabhupada writes in an earlier purport, there is no inside or outside to Krishna. There is only Krishna. Now, this might be a little confusing to grasp, but that's all right. That's the nature of Krishna. If we could grasp him easily, then we wouldn't be having an easy time. Tarun Prabhu, you've unmuted. Do you have a question?
Yeah, Prabhu. Like if we say like he's himself and like there's no inside and outside, I'm just thinking, so he does not have a dimension of space. Like that particular tattva, like if it's space, then something is outside, and which means, you know, it's very like a difficult to.
Yeah, it's difficult to grasp, isn't it? Yeah. So there's no inside or outside in the sense that the inside and the outside are absolutely the same, right? The inside of Krishna and the outside of Krishna are exactly the same. But how he has a dimension of space is also confusing, because even though he has form, that form is infinite. It's sometimes described how we can see the flame, right? The flame has the same form as the bushfire, right? But the bushfire is much, much larger than the flame, right? Even though that's the same form. If we take that analogy even further, Krishna's form is as if it's an infinite bushfire. We can seem to grasp it in the murti form or something, right? But it's still an infinite form. That's why Krishna, he is sometimes smaller than the most small. He appears in the heart of the devotee. And sometimes he is larger than the most large, right? All of the universes rest in him, right? And yet he's always absolutely Krishna. This is what we play around with when we talk about God having a form, because it becomes very, very difficult to wrestle with. But yeah, so there is an element of it is just very hard to grasp, but particularly on that comment about him not having an inside or having an outside, it means that if we were to see the inside of Krishna, it's absolutely the same as the outside of Krishna. Yes, Bhumi-gītā Mataji?
Prabhu, I have another question.
Yes.
Can I ask you now?
Please.
So you said Krishna has many births. How come Krishna, I thought he was just born once.
Oh, okay, yes, for sure. We'll discuss that in the next text, because that touches on that exactly.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No. So Krishna, he is his body, and however the conditioned soul is not, and therefore it changes its body birth by birth, and therefore as the bodies slowly change, the memories fade away and new memories are created, and especially after death, memories are lost. This is especially so that the spirit souls, because why are they here in this material world? They want to experience what it's like to be the controller, right? They want to experience what it's like. They want to have a shot at feeling like they're in charge. And if you remembered millions and millions of births of you just getting curb stomped by reality, then you would really not be able to have that ability to feel like you're the controller. And therefore the spirit souls, they don't remember their many, many births. They forget them. So, and also, of course, because their bodies deteriorate and change, and there's all new bodies, and the memories slowly fade away. But Krishna, he does not have this. So already we have Krishna distinguishing himself as compared to the conditioned soul. Then we hear the next text. Ajopi san avyayatma bhutanam ishvaropi san prakritim swam adhishtaya sambhavam yatma mayaya. Maybe we can have Varun Prabhu. Would you like to read out the English? This is text 6.
Is that just the translation on the screen? Or?
Yeah.
Although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all living entities, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form.
Okay, so we can hear this being discussed again. 1 second, I'm just gonna, I don't know why my phone's going off. So we are hearing this, right? This is clarifying the previous statement. Although I'm unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I'm the Lord of all living entities, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. And that's how the word Prakriti is rendered. Sometimes you'll hear Mayavadis. They will talk about how, well, Prakriti here, it means material nature. But Prakriti doesn't actually always mean material nature. It can often mean other things as well. And in this case, it refers to a transcendental form rather than a material one. So here we find Krishna, he's discussing this, right? Although I am unborn and my body never deteriorates, I still appear in every millennium. Now, this can be a little confusing, and this goes to Bhumi-gītā Mataji's point, right? Because Krishna says, ajaha, right? I am unborn. But what do we celebrate on Janmashtami? What is Janmashtami a celebration of?
Krishna's avatar?
Krishna's appearance, right? And Janma means birth, right? So what do we do? Should we go up to our local temple next Janmashtami and tell them that they need to study the Bhagavad-gītā better? They've fallen into Maya. They think that the unborn Lord has a birth. Should we tell them that it should become Janmashtami? It is the unbirth appearance of the Supreme Personality. Should we say such a thing? No, because even though the Supreme Lord is unborn, he is always appearing. And there's the famous analogy of the sun, right? The sun rises in one direction and it sets in another, but the sun is never destroyed, nor can we say the sun actually comes into being. So even though Krishna, he manifests the pastime of being born, it is not that he did not exist before his birth. And it is not that he came to be because of his birth. It is merely like the rising of the sun. And therefore he has many births, but he is never born in that sense. Yes, Tamal Krishna Goswami, he puts it very nicely. On Janmashtami, we celebrate the unborn taking birth. It's another sweet tension of Krishna consciousness. So here we find this, right? Krishna, he is born, but he is not born the same way we are, because when we are born, we very substantially are born in every sense of the word. But Krishna, he maintains his transcendental nature.
Prabhu, I was just reading that section of Krishna's birth from the Srimad Bhagavatam, and
Yes.
it's so beautiful. It just describes even the, how we think about the conception of a child, even that's blown into the water. And the way that Krishna is delivered to Devaki is through the heart.
Yes.
Through the heart, because he becomes her spiritual master by being full Krishna consciousness, and then through the heart he transfers Krishna to her and then to a womb. So even that is so beautiful and unlike anything we've ever heard before. Krishna extends beyond conception.
Yes, and it's really nice when you compare in Shastra, because some Shastras will discuss how Mother Yashoda became pregnant with Krishna as well, and so and it's really nice to see that the distinctions, because Vasudeva and Devaki, they have this really beautiful narrative, right? They're chanting the mantras and everything, and it's very opulent. They know they're giving birth to Supreme Lord, but Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda, they've got no idea. They've got no idea that they're giving birth to anyone special. Actually, I'll say the past time. We don't have time for it, but I'll say it anyways. It's I forgot which one of the Goswamis describes it. When Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda in Vrindavan, they're there and they're existing, but because Yoga Maya has covered their knowledge of Krishna, they don't know that they're going to have Krishna in their lives, but still as devotees, they feel this complete pain, right? They're thinking our lives are incomplete, there's something missing. They feel that very existential crisis. And so in order to resolve this, Nanda Maharaj, he discusses to Mother Yashoda, and they're both talking and they're saying, we're both experiencing the same thing, right? And so Nanda Maharaj says, well, I will start fasting, right? I will be observing a Dwadasi fast as well as an Ekadashi fast, right? And I will be observing this fast in order to resolve, right? In order to find a solution to our problem, right? And like this, he would fast. And so doing this, his fast, he would say, I'm doing this austerity. I want to figure out the solution to why my wife and I, we feel completely empty inside, like there's no purpose to our existence. And so then every night after completing the fast, so every fortnight or so, right, he would have this beautiful dream, right, of this really sweet, dark blue baby boy, right? And he would have this beautiful dream. And every single time he would see all of these wonderful qualities, and he would just be stuck in his mind. And every morning when he would wake up, he would tell Mother Yashoda, he would say, oh, you won't believe the dream I had of this most beautiful boy. And he was there with his wonderful lotus form and his beautiful, deep eyes. And he had such radiant, glowing skin. And like this, he would describe Krishna's beautiful form. And like this, it would go on and go on and go on until eventually Mother Yashoda, she would become pregnant with twins, right? And eventually then, of course, we know Mother Yashoda, she gives birth to Krishna, as does Devaki. And the point that's made there is we can even find here, not to go back to the parampara, we had 2 hours of that, but we can find that although how was Devaki impregnated through the use of mantra, right? The mantras were what allowed Devaki to give birth to Krishna. And so we can find the mantras are so valuable. How valuable are mantras? They can create Krishna in our heart. But how even more superior is Krishna Katha, right? The hearing of Krishna's transcendental qualities. How much more transcendental is that? Because that gives the fullness of Braj Krishna, right? Mother Yashoda, the ultimate mother of Krishna, she is she gives birth to Krishna through the hearing of Hari Katha, of hearing the qualities of Krishna, of hearing the pastimes of Krishna. This is how she's able to give birth to Krishna. Anyway, it's a little tangential, but I think it's a sweet pastime. Yeah. So we find there Krishna's birth very special, very distinct. So even though we can say Krishna has many births, we can also say he has no births, right? But he always does in terms of pastime. He's playing this role in order to taste those moods. Why does he do it? Well, we'll hear it in a second. The next text is the most famous one, right? In the Bhagavad-gītā, right? We all know it. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyuttanam dharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham, right? In the Mahabharata TV show. That's where that educated all of us on the on our shloka test, which is why this one isn't included in the shloka test. So yada yada hi dharmasya. Maybe we can have Jaswant. Oh no, I already asked Jaswant Prabhu. Have I asked Jaswant Prabhu already?
No, Prabhu.
No? Okay. Then you read out the translation.
Sure, Prabhu. Whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharata, and the predominant rise of a religion, at that time I descend myself.
Yes, very good. So here we hear this very famous thing. And here we're finding a few certain things around these texts. This text is describing the when, and text 8 discusses why and what of Krishna's appearance. So Krishna here, he's answering his texts 5 to 8. They're discussing the answer to Arjuna's question, right? That Arjuna's asked, well, what's going on, right? What is the nature of your activities that you can say that you were instructing Vivasva, right? And so Krishna, he's speaking about the nature of divinity. What does it mean for God to be God, right? And this is what Krishna is discussing. So all of this is being answered in texts 5 to 8. And then 9 onwards begins to discuss the nature of understanding that. And then it sort of flips back as well. But the chunk of the answer gets done here. And so now he's describing, firstly, I've had many births. So he's confirming the nature of his births. And he's confirming that they're different. Then in 6 now, he's describing the qualities of that birth, right? Avyayatma, right? He appears through his own energy, his own mercy, right? This is also significant. Krishna appears through his own mercy, not through any other means. Nothing can cause Krishna to do anything. So Krishna does it of his own free will, right? Krishna simply wishes to do it and he does it. It is not that we can actually say there's any substantial cause. So when we hear yada yada hi dharmasya, it is not that, oh no, now irreligion has appeared, Krishna has to appear. It is that out of Krishna's own mercy, out of his own transcendental energy, he appears. And he appears with his imperishable body, right? If his body is imperishable, then when we hear Srijamyaham, I descend myself, we understand that this is a manifestation of his body. It is not a creation. It is not, as some Mayavadis will say, that Krishna creates a material body to dwell in, because Krishna has clearly said that his body is imperishable. And so Krishna appears, yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata, when there's a decline in religion, and when there's an increase in irreligion. And we find Srila Prabhupada in the purport, he speaks to the nature of the fact that, well, Krishna can send either himself or his representative, right? And so Srila Prabhupada, he refutes this idea, right? That sometimes people will have, right? That what we today call India, which is of course a very modern thing, right? India as a concept is only a few hundred years old, right? People will get very, I find nationalism and patriotism are so absurd, especially because any country, not just India, but virtually any country has only been around for a few hundred years. Even in Europe, right? Some people might say, well, Europe had all these kings and queens, but they're all kings and queens of different territories and all. Like, I can only give the example of Germany off the top of my head, or the UK, but those only existed as unified entities over a slow process of moving these areas and that areas. Unified countries and unified nations are a very modern concept, right? So nationalism and patriotism are all just so absurd because you're getting very, very attached to something that only has existed for a few hundred years before you and realistically won't last for many hundred years after you. They all felt the same way about Babylon, right? But to go to the map and look at Babylon, it doesn't exist anymore. Or Assyria, right? Or all sorts of other nations, right? They don't exist anymore. And the nations we know and love today, they're not too well preserved. So nationalism and patriotism are all just absurd notions. But anyways, sometimes people will have the idea, right? That, oh, well, Krishna, he only sends his knowledge to India, right? Or what we would call today India, right? That tract of land, right? Or we could say, maybe some people say the India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka area, right? That's where Krishna sends his knowledge to. But Srila Prabhupada, he does not agree with this idea. Instead, he says that everywhere Krishna, he is establishing this knowledge, right? And so either Krishna himself directly does it, or Krishna will send his representative, and either one is equal. It is not that because Krishna appears somewhere, that's actually better than receiving the representative of Krishna. Either one is equal. Prabhupada, he'll say this in some morning walks, right? He'll say they've to have received the son of Krishna, the messenger of Krishna, is as good as having received Krishna. It's not that Krishna is giving incorrect or impartial treatment. However, we will discuss in 4.8 why then Krishna himself directly appears. So who are these empowered personalities? We find some of them are Buddha, right? Sometimes people think Buddha is a direct incarnation, but he's not, right? And so we will discuss the different nature of avatars, of descents, how we can speak about there being different representatives or so. Before I get to that, Jaswant Prabhu, you have a question?
Yes, Prabhu. A couple of weeks ago, you asked us to think about a question, why Krishna do everything or anything when he's fully satisfied?
Yes.
And now today, these verses are relating to that. So there is a purpose why Krishna descends. So, but I want to hear from you, Prabhu, because I got 2 or 3 reasons after doing the research about it. But I want to hear from you what exactly the reason, like why does Krishna do everything and anything?
Well, yes, that will come up in text 8.
Okay.
Text 8 and text 11 are the keys to that question. It's a very good question. It's a very old philosophical question, right? Because if God is all satisfied, then why does anything exist? Why does he bother doing anything, right? I mean, we can think about it. If we all won the lottery, how many of us would keep on working, you know? So yeah, okay. But yeah, we'll come around to that. So before we go on to that though, we should discuss the nature of Krishna's descent. And to understand that, Prabhupada, he gives 6 types of avatars, 6 types of incarnations, right? And we will discuss those quickly. We'll list them out. You should learn this list. It may or may not be in your closed book exam. And from that, we can discuss then how Krishna sends all his other representatives and how he also himself appears. So does anyone know this list already? I'm curious, because sometimes people know some things from the course and sometimes people don't. It's all right if none of you do, but does anyone know the 6 types of avatars? Srikanta Sena Prabhu has volunteered some information.
So there are Leela avatars?
Yes, we have Leela avatars.
So those avatars consist of those avatars that partake in particular Leelas?
Yeah.
That have some kind of message or some kind of use that Krishna just said, Parityana sadhanam, nashayajatushritam. There is the Guna avatars, or the avatars which are incarnated based off the 3 gunas. This is Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu.
Yep.
Then you have Shaktivesh Avatars. These are avatars which are particularly empowered to do a particular action on behalf of the Supreme Lord.
I think you're going to give Mrugank Prabhu an aneurysm at this rate.
Sorry.
No. All good. I'm just saying.
So example of Shaktivesh is the current Vyasadeva.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There is the Yuga avatar.
Yes.
So the avatar which is descended to instruct on the particular Yuga Dharma. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructs the Yuga Dharma of this age, which is Sankirtan. Previously had many different incarnations, described in Canto 12 to King Nimi. The 5th one, Lila Guna Shaktivesh Yuga. Hint, Prabhu? Manvantara avatar.
Yeah.
Right. So so when a particular Manvantara Manu is not in a position to take that position, then Krishna himself comes.
No, actually, all Manus.
As the Manu.
All Manu periods have either have a direct or an empowered incarnation. So even the regular one, there'll always be an avatar to preside over each era of Manu, if they're a Jiva or directly Vishnu Tattva. But no, even So all of them, So it's not an irregular occurrence. Yeah, all of those are presiding over the Manu era are considered Manvantara avatars. Okay, and then the last one. This is it's the easiest one. You've remembered all the difficult ones and you've forgotten the easiest one. Okay, the Purush Avatars.
That's the hardest one.
Oh, okay. I always found those ones the easiest ones. The Purush Avatars. Okay, so by the way, everyone, don't get worried with the list. I'm going to go through in a little more detail now. Thank you, Srikanta Sena Prabhu. Your Bhagavatam reading is paying off. You've remembered all of them. So yeah, except for Manvantara avatars. Okay, so these are the 6 types of avatars. So we have the Leela avatars. They're primarily, and also there's going to be crossover, right? So one guna avatar, namely Brahma, he is a Shaktivesh avatar, right? Some of the Leela avatars are Shaktivesh avatars, right? So there will be some category crossover, right? So don't get too caught up in it. But this is the general way that we sort of categorize the different incarnations. Manvantara avatars we've already discussed, right? The person presiding over a Manu period. Manu, we can say, you know, is the Adam of each era, right? So next I'll discuss the Purush Avatars, okay? So the Purush Avatars are Vishnu, right? Sometimes people will say they can all also be considered the Paramatma, right? So we have at the beginning, when the universe is being created, we have the massive causal ocean, right? And the causal ocean is, well, it's an ocean built quite literally of causation. And in it is flowing Mahavishnu, right? And in that, oh, Mrugank Prabhu has disappeared. In that ocean, we found that Mahavishnu, he creates all of matter, right? He manifests all of matter. All of matter comes from him. And then all the universes form. And then we have the second Purush Avatar, right? And he appears in each universe, and he helps each universe in turn be manifest, right? He creates Brahma, and then Brahma assembles each universe. And then we have the last Purush Avatar, who is the Paramatma, we normally talk about, the super soul in the heart, right? Then the Lord, he incarnates into the heart of everyone and everything. Oh, okay, that's what Mrugank Prabhu is doing. I thought his hand just got sore after how quickly he had to write all of those 6 categories down. To my knowledge, the Purush Avatar does not include the first Catur vyuhas, because the Catur vyuhas aren't technically incarnations, they're expansions. I could be wrong, I'd need to double check. Please refer to Laghu Bhagavatamrita for your avatar questions. Like, that book goes into so much depth on it. But off the top of my head, the Catur vyuhas are expansions. So it's an avatar. And what does the word avatar mean? It means to descend, right? So an avatar is when the line from the spiritual world has been crossed into the material world. That's when it counts as an avatar. So when Krishna expands in the spiritual world, which is where the Catur vyuhas are expanding, those are expansions, not incarnations. If you guys don't understand Catur vyuha, don't worry about it. that's an honors course topic. So yeah, that comes up later on in CC, Chaitanya Charitamrita.
So,
okay,
Prabhu,
yeah.
Sorry, I have one question. I don't want to divert so much, but so essentially there's no qualitative difference, at least with respect to, like, let's for example say Leela Avatar. So those avatars, there's no qualitative difference between the Leela Avatar and then that particular form of the Lord in Vaikuntha. It's just the fact that they're in the world.
Yeah, that they've crossed down, right?
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah. So even Krishna himself, even though he's the source of all avatars, will sometimes be called an avatar when he's manifesting his pastimes. Even though it's not even an expansion or anything, it's directly the fullness of the Supreme Lord. Okay, so yeah. So we can see there, Mrugank Prabhu has shared that. I don't know if you can zoom in onto the one universe, the bottom half.
No, I probably can't.
Okay, that's all right. But I'm sure you can see there where Mrugank's got, that's the causal ocean. That's the ocean. That's why when we hear pastimes, they sometimes don't make a lot of sense, because causation as we know it, like the laws of physics and all, and this causes that, and therefore this, and therefore that, all of that begins there, right? And that's where the material universe is born from, like this causation, this causal relationships, right? And from there, you can see all the universes, right? All of matter is being manifested from him. Then inside the universe, we find the next super soul, right? The next Purush Avatar. And he's down there at the bottom. And he's there to preside over each individual universe, right? And from him, Brahma gets born, right? And then in all of our hearts, in every single atom, then he expands once again, right? So in this way, the Purush Avatars are really what we talk about when we say God, right? When we talk about God in the general sense, we are generally referring to the Purush Avatars. Not we, but when the average person talks about God, they're talking about the person who's running the joint, right? Those are the Purush Avatars. Krishna, He is also obviously what we refer to when we say God, but he is God. I don't want to say removed from the material world because he does relate to it, obviously, but he is God in of himself, right? God dealing with himself, God fully transcendentally above it, right? The Purush Avatars, if you will, are Krishna's day job, right? There when he's doing all of the stuff, ruling the universe, making sure everything's happening fine, right? All of that sort of stuff. And so when people talk about the promptings in their hearts that they feel, when they pray to God, right? In every religion, people feel that. Most of the time, that is referring to the Purush Avatars, right? In the heart. Now, for the devotee of Krishna, it's Krishna speaking directly to the heart. But for the average person who's sort of just throwing it out there, praying to God, they're praying most likely to Vishnu, right? The Purush Avatars, which there's nothing bad about. It's nothing to be, the Purush Avatars are still qualitatively the same as Krishna, even if they are expansions. And that's also a little bit confusing, right? But okay, let's keep on going, discussing the list of avatars. Thank you, Mrugank, for sharing that. Yes. Mrugank, if you can get back, to the notes. You don't, honestly, if you just produce this list without describing them, that would let you pass the question. You'd get full marks on the question. I'm just going into details so you know what we're talking about. So those are the Purush Avatars, Manvantara Avatars, again, if we just scroll up, And then Leela Avatars, as we can understand, they're there to manifest pastimes, right? All of it is pastimes, but in particular, they're there just to have Leelas, right? It's Krishna celebrating his own existence. Guna Avatars, they are categorized like that. So each one is there in is to oversee a different mode of material nature. So which mode is Brahma in charge of? Of the three modes, which mode is Brahma in charge of?
Passion.
Passion, right? Because he's creating, right? And creation is a passionate thing. He is the demiurge. So Brahma, he presides over passion. What does Shiva preside over?
Ignorance.
Ignorance, yes. Because Shiva, in order to destroy the universe, he needs to get very angry. And anger proceeds from ignorance. And then now, I hope no one will struggle to, it's the process of elimination. Which mode is Vishnu presiding over? Divyansh Prabhu. Oh, yeah.
Goodness.
Goodness, yes. Goodness, right? So because we have Brahma, he is there to create, and that is very passionate. We have Shiva, he's there to destroy, and that is very much from ignorance. And there we have goodness, because goodness is how things are maintained. The maintenance of our bodies in good health is held by having a diet in the mode of goodness, right? Living in the mode of goodness means a long and healthy life, not sleeping too much, not sleeping too little, right? Not eating too much, not eating too little. Goodness is about being in equanimity. So they preside over the three modes, but each one is a different type of avatar. And this is going to get confusing. So we'll discuss the Shaktivesh Avatar. But Krishna is Nirguna. Yes, good point, right? So even Shiva is not necessarily in the mode of ignorance, right? However, they preside over the modes, right? So that's why they're identified with the three ones, because they have a specific relation to each one of the modes. But it's not that Vishnu is in the mode of goodness. That is correct. Yeah, good point, Alex. Yeah, I needed to clarify that. Brahma even is not necessarily in the mode of passion, although he is under the three modes, right? He is within the three modes, Brahma, but Vishnu is not under the three modes. However, he is presiding over it. The work of goodness, particularly the maintenance of the mode of goodness, is presided over by Vishnu. Does that make sense, Alex?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good point to clarify. So if the destruction is done through devotion, is it still ignorance? Like his destruction is still ignorance? So his destruction isn't ignorance either. It's rather the destruction itself is, right? So it's a similar thing as Vishnu, right? It's not that Vishnu is under goodness and therefore he does the job of maintenance, but rather he does the job of maintenance and that's under goodness, if that makes sense. If we think about it in that reverse order, maybe it's a bit clearer. Because Shiva, as we know, Shiva is a unique category, and I'm not going to discuss how Shiva incarnates now, just because it's already a bit of information overload right now. This is a lot of info. Okay, so I'll just give the basic analogy. Shiva relates to Krishna in the same way that milk relates to curd, right? When you have milk and you add a tiny bit of curd, it all curds up, right? It all becomes cheese. So in this way, we can say that when Vishnu mixes with Maya, he becomes Shiva, right? But why then do we say that Vishnu or Krishna, right? Why do we say he's superior to Shiva? It's because milk can become curd, but curd cannot become milk, right? It's a one-way, it's a one-way relationship. So Shiva, he's in this very interesting marginal position, right? Milk can always become more curd, but curd does not become milk backwards. So Shiva, he is a result of Vishnu, and he's a result of Vishnu blending in with Maya. In one sense, he's not Nirgun. He's not Nirguna like Vishnu is, because he is the mixture of it. I was talking to Bhakti Rasayan Sagar, or not talking, I was asking Bhakti Rasayan Sagar Maharaj a question once, and he said that Shiva can be understood when Mahavishnu, who we've described, the Purush Avatar, when he manifests all of material nature, he looks at it, right? He looks at it and glances over and impregnates it with time, right? He puts time and all of the souls into matter. His glance, the actual glance, not his eyes, but his actual glance itself personified is Shiva, because his glance is what comes into contact with matter. So that actual act of the transcendental Lord coming into contact with matter, that act itself is Shiva. Okay, if you're all confused with that, don't worry. It's not gonna come up for another while, right? But that's just for anyone who's curious about that. The glance goes through Ramadevi to give birth to the material world. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that, Srikanta Sena.
It was given by a class by Nashim Kavacha.
Yeah.
And he speaks about the fact that Krishna actually never touches the material world. So if you were to actually give birth to the material world, your Krishna, because he's the supreme personality Godhead, he is in it, but he's beyond it. So in order to give birth, you need to not touch it. So the form medium, like you were saying, is the glance of the Lord, which is carried by Shiva.
Yeah.
And it impregnates Rama Devi, not Rama, but Rama Devi.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is Durga's like the top form. Which then gives birth to the material world.
Yeah. 100%. That's it. Right. So it's Shiva, if you will. You can think he's almost the barrier between transcendence and the material world. So, and that's why if we went back onto the map that Mrugank Prabhu had, you can see, and no need to, if you can do it quickly, you can see, if you scroll up on it, you can see that the boundary line between material existence and spiritual existence, this is a different Shiva there. There's also different Shivas. It gets so complicated. I'm not going to give you all the headache of it right now because it's tangential. If you see right there where Mrugank's pointing out, that is Mount Kailash. That is where Shiva lives. He lives quite literally on the boundary between the material and spiritual worlds because he is the meeting point of both of them. Okay. Shiva Tattva is considered one of the most confusing philosophical points in our whole philosophy. So I'm not going to get more into it, but I'm just saying, if you feel a little confused by that, don't worry. Like literal acharyas I've heard say Shiva Tattva is very difficult. Yeah. Okay, so let's keep on going then. I just want to discuss a few more things just so we can discuss the nature of God's representative. And then in the next half, we will discuss the answer to the question I posed to you all, why does God do anything, right? So the Yugavatar, that's straightforward. This is an avatar that comes to give the process for each age. So in Satya Yuga, Hamsa appeared and taught them all meditation, right? Then, and in Srimad Bhagavatam, we'll find there's a list of all of them. They're all different colors, right? So it was white in Satya Yuga, red in Treta Yuga, to give yagyas, right? Then black in Dwapara Yuga to give deity worship. That was Krishna, right? And then golden in Kali Yuga in order to give the Sankirtan, chanting of the holy names. So they give the predominant form of religion in each age. And the whole concept of the Yuga Avatar implies Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sometimes people will wonder, where is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu present in the Vedic literature? There's some explicit mentions to him, and there's also implicit ones. We'll even find it in the next text. Sambhavami yuge yuge. I myself appear in every age, right? So therefore there must be an avatar in Kali Yuga, and that avatar is of course Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Okay, but now last one, the Shaktivesh Avatar, and that's what I wanted to get to. The Shaktivesh Avatar can either is something which manifests the fullness of Krishna's Shakti, right? Of Krishna's potency. There are two types. Some are directly the Supreme Lord himself, and others are living entities who are empowered, okay? When we speak of Shaktivesh avatars, we normally mean living entities that are empowered, but there are sometimes ones which are directly just a really, well, they're so filled with the Shakti that they're considered the Supreme Lord. So a Shaktivesh avatar generally though is a spirit soul like you or me, but is a spirit soul that is being filled with Krishna's empowerment, right? And therefore they're in a very interesting position, right? Because they are avatars, they are descents of Krishna, but they're descents of Krishna's full empowerment and potency. So examples are Buddha, right? Buddha is an example, right? Buddha was empowered. Only Krishna himself could get everyone to stop believing in the Vedas. So, and that's what he was empowered to do, right? He was empowered by Krishna to have the ability. Only the person who got everyone to believe the Vedic literature could get everyone to stop believing in them, right? So Krishna, he empowered. Another example would be Parashuram, right? Killing so many individuals, right? How many people? Yes. Right? Another example would be Srila Prabhupada, right? Srila Prabhupada is a Shaktivesh avatar. Who else could, with no money and a few sets of Bhagavatam, chanting under a tree? And it's very sweet. You can see the tree that when Prabhupada first arrived in America, he would sit under and chant under. They have a little plaque there, like there's a little plaque and it says, this is where A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, this is the tree he sat under and chanted in to begin the Krishna consciousness movement. So Srila Prabhupada, he's a Shaktivesh avatar.
I think that's a controversial point.
Is it?
Yeah, it is a controversial point.
I've never heard anyone dispute it.
Only because, well, if you look at the two Shaktivesh avatars you mentioned before,
yeah,
they're specific and they're always Shakti in the sense that those entities are always Shaktivesh avatars, if you know what I'm saying. Whereas, and there is no particular given identity in the spiritual world, whereas Srila Prabhupada, it's a different kind of ball game altogether.
How so? I'm not seeing a distinction.
Well, Prabhupada has his own I'm not going to go into too much detail, but he has his own identity in the spiritual world.
Yeah. So he has his own identity, but he's still empowered. It's like, I don't know what Buddha's identity is in the spiritual world, right? But he's still an empowered incarnation.
But does that not necessarily mean that every devotee that goes out there on Sankirtan and does Sankirtan and gives out a book is necessarily empowered in the same light? Or
no, because it's in terms of empowerment, right?
Right.
So Srila Prabhupada is fully empowered. To a degree, every devotee is, right? And any devotee who acts as a guru is, because Balaram, he directly empowers any. So the moment you act as a guru, you are to a degree empowered by Balaram. But when we talk about the Shaktivesh Avatar, we mean fully empowered, right? Like there is a full direct empowerment by Krishna. And so there's a real mix. We're at the point where there's a mix of the jiva and divinity in order to have things achieved. Does that make sense? Because even if you go outside of ISKCON, Srila Prabhupada is acknowledged as a Shaktivesh Avatar. One of the first acharyas, one of the first devotees to refer to Srila Prabhupada as a Shaktivesh Avatar was actually a Gauriya Math acharya. So my understanding is it's pretty universally accepted that he was a Shaktivesh Avatar, if that makes sense.
Yes. I'll just, maybe we discuss offline.
Okay, yeah. I'm happy to
I
continue
have
this
more to say.
conversation further because I kind of get where you're coming from.
Yes.
But yeah, it was, so Srila Prabhupada, was empowered to establish Krishna consciousness all around the world, right? That is a very great feat. And then we have other examples, and this is now coming back to the point of the purport, right? Other examples are all over the world of individuals who achieved great things in order to make the world a more God-conscious place. Srila Prabhupada will give the example of Muhammad, right? The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was considered by Srila Prabhupada to be a Shaktivesh Avatar, right? And so he said, because what did he do? He went in Arabia and he established religious principles, right? When you read, when you read Arabian history, right? Arabia was not in a very good condition when the Prophet Muhammad appeared, right? In the Quran, if you read it, there's instructions which talk about if you have a child and it's not the gender you want, you shouldn't bury it alive, right? That is not a very elevated society if they're doing that, right? However, the Prophet Muhammad managed to really transform it, right? He managed to really shift it in order to be that there was not, like if you read about Arabian history and the build up to when Muhammad appeared, it wasn't in a very good condition, and he really did reform it and establish religious principles. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada says, and therefore, Srila Prabhupada says that Muhammad is also Shaktivesh Avatar, right? So that would be another example. So all around the world, it is not just in the Indian subcontinent, if you will, that the Lord appears, or that the Lord empowers, or that the avatar happens. It is all around the world, right? Krishna is the Lord of all of the world, right? Not just one place. That's why he is Jagannath, not, whatever Nath, America Nath, or anything, right? Every religion will have, some people will have that problem, right? Where they will think, if you talk to a fundamentalist Christian, God only ever sent his messengers or representatives in a tiny little strip of land in the Middle East, right? So this isn't me picking on Vedic people. It's just sometimes we can be closed-minded, but Srila Prabhupada challenges us to not be closed-minded, right? To realize that actually the whole world is having some sort of conversation with Krishna. Vidhi Mataji?
Prabhu, does that mean Jesus is also a guna?
Yes, so Jesus is also put in this category, yes. Srila Prabhupada said that Jesus is Shaktivesh Avatar. Yeah, so like this we can understand. So then, so all are bringing a message, all are in one sense divine, right? And in another sense, regular jivas, right? There's this interesting, because they are avatars, but they're also jivas, right? So they're an interesting category, right? So yeah, and in this way, the whole world, right, is having representatives. And as Srila Prabhupada has explicitly said, the representative is as good as having Krishna himself, right? Because Krishna has empowered, Krishna's full empowerment is there. So there is no favoritism. Anyways, we'll have our quick 5-minute break now, and then we'll come back to text 8 and we will get into that question I posed all of you. Because they can be the question, right? If, and I'll leave this question for the break, if it is the case, right, that Krishna's empowered representative is as good as Krishna in terms of achieving the goal, right? And in terms of representing him, right? If he's as good, then why does Krishna himself appear at all, right? Why does he go through all of that quote unquote effort? And that is the question we will be answering in text 8 after our 5-minute break. So I'll see you all at 11:15. Okay, so what was the question I left you all with? It was Arjuna, not Arjuna, oh yeah, Arjuna now can wonder, right? Well, if you can send your representative, right? And if your representative is as good as you appearing, then why do you appear at all? And then we have the next text. And I think this is one of your shlokas for memorization, right? Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. And again, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, yuge yuge. In every yuga I appear. So how can we say that Mahaprabhu is not somehow residually there, implicitly there in the Bhagavad-gītā? So now we are finding out here in text 8, why does Krishna himself appear? And what reason is that? In the purport, Srila Prabhupada, he clarifies exactly what it means. Even though 3 reasons are given, paritranaya sadhunam, right? To deliver the pious, vinashaya cha dushkritam, and to annihilate the miscreants, and then dharma samsthapanarthaya, to reestablish the principles of religion. The heart of why Krishna appears is in paritranaya sadhunam, is to deliver the pious. But before I come to that, I just want to make a quick point. To annihilate the miscreants sounds a little rough, right? To kill all the demons, right? It doesn't sound like the Krishna we know, right? out on a spree. But in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it says that whenever Krishna kills a demon, it's not actually Krishna killing the demon, it's Vishnu in Krishna killing the demon. It's a little complex how that works out with everything else we've discussed before, but just a little burn I thought I'd throw out for food of thought. But what happens to anyone that is, to any demon that is killed by Krishna? What happens? Who can tell me? What happens when Krishna kills a demon?
They go back to the higher planets?
No, in fact, they attain liberation. Even better than the higher planets. What a deal, right? But does anyone know why? Jiva Goswami, he gives the reason why, like the mechanism why. Does anyone know?
Could it be that he has received kind of the punishment from the highest authority? There is nothing like it. Because he has also received the mercy that God has killed him, so all his good karmas are gone. And because he has received the punishment from the highest authority, there is no bad karma left. So he goes to the point 0.
Yes, that's actually correct. That's it. We have to keep the point 0 in mind, right? So what happens is, as we'll read later on, Krishna, he reciprocates anyone's mood back to them, right? So when Krishna does kill, or Vishnu in Krishna does it, what happens is they are there with that full desire to fully destroy Krishna, right? And so Krishna, he reciprocates that and he fully destroys them, right? However, all hatred from Krishna is not coming from the soul. Hatred from Krishna comes from the mind, right? And the mind is a product of good and bad karma, right? So because of this, when Krishna does that, all of the karma is destroyed, and therefore all of the material mind is destroyed, and all that's left is for that soul. Then, in a completely pure state, it sees Krishna, and the soul in the pure state is attracted to Krishna. and seeing Krishna and experiencing that attraction to him, he therefore obtains liberation. Because it's the mind that produces all of the negative ideas about Krishna, right? Does that make sense? So in this way, this is the mechanism by which, of course, again, Krishna, he's not too fussed on slaying demons. That's more the job of Vishnu, right? So Vishnu is the one who lands the punch. If everyone's going, oh, because they don't achieve like the fullest of like bhakti, if that makes sense. They don't, so that's a good point, right? Why not be, well, even if you're a demon, it's not guaranteed you're going to be killed by Krishna, right? Not all of them not all demons get killed by Krishna, right? Some of them just keep on going forever and ever and ever. It's just the fortunate ones who Krishna decides to give the mercy of slaying to, right? They're the ones that achieve that. And secondly, it's not a high liberation, right? It's not like they go into the hearts of the Vaikuntha planets. Most of them do not, right? Most of them won't go to Goloka, right? Goloka is open up to those who meditate on Krishna, not with hatred, but with love. So therefore, there's still some benefit. But even then, the whole idea of devotional service isn't that we love Krishna because we get to go to the spiritual world afterwards. That's not bhakti then, right? Bhakti is we love Krishna because he's beautiful and he plays his flute very well. Do you get what I mean? Motivation is a very secondary aspect to why we would want to practice devotional service. We sing in the kirtan not for the benefits, but because kirtan is the highest joy. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, so that's a little not tangential. So that's that point. But now we're finally getting to the absolute complete point. Why does Krishna come? And this is also repeated by Prabhupada in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Why does Krishna himself come? Because his devotees are hankering to see him. His devotees are suffering because they cannot see Krishna. They wish to see Krishna. And because of that, Krishna himself appears. Krishna can do anything he wants by getting somebody else to do it, but he himself cannot. The only thing he can't do is appease the devotee who wishes to see Krishna directly, because the devotees, the pious, they are not waiting for the world to get better. Of course, they're waiting for that, right? But they are not waiting for that primarily. They're not waiting, right, for all sorts of other things, to receive knowledge, to receive understanding. The devotees are waiting to see the beautiful smile of Krishna, and only Krishna himself can give that to them. And therefore, Krishna appears. Krishna himself appears because no one else but Krishna himself will appease the desire of the devotees to see him. And this principle can be expanded out further. Krishna only does anything because his devotees want him to. Krishna, the unmoved mover, is completely moved by the devotees. Why does Krishna do anything? His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Maharaj once said that the solar system moves, right? The planets move in the solar system because Krishna is running after his friends in the spiritual world. That is how movement begins. Because ultimately, we can say God is supreme, right? And Krishna is supreme. He is a supreme controller. But that supreme controller himself is controlled by love. Ultimately, Krishna consciousness, even though we are Vaishnavas, ultimately we are Shaktas, right? Because we say Shakti, the potency, the energy of love, that is what rules the world, right? That is what rules reality. And Krishna himself is ruled by that. And so Krishna himself, he moves. Why does he move? Because his equanimity is disturbed. His desirelessness is disturbed by the fact that his devotees desire something, right? And they desire him. And therefore Krishna desires his devotee. And because of that, reality moves. Because of that, the unmoved mover moves. It is a celebration of his fullness. He is full of love, and therefore he dances. And he dances with his devotees. And because he does that, his devotees get him to do things. Krishna does things because Krishna is not alone. Krishna has somebody to dance with. He has somebody to celebrate his fullness and his beauty with. And this is why the unmoved mover moves. This is why the fully satisfied moves, because that fully satisfied self celebrates that satisfaction in the dance with his devotees. Does this make sense? So ultimately, there's a whole lot of reasons we can give why Krishna does anything, but ultimately he does so in order to please his devotees. That is ultimately why he does anything. Are there any questions regarding that as I move on?
Prabhu, I have a question.
Yes.
So when we say to kill demons, but for us, would you refer demons as our internal demons, like lust, greed, envy? So for us, would that be in relation to that?
Yes. So when Mahaprabhu comes, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, if he were to have actually killed all the demons, he would have killed basically everyone on earth, right?
Yeah.
So it's said that the weapons that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appear with are the holy name, right? The holy name is the sword by which he slays all the demons, for exactly what you said, right? Ultimately, the slaying of demons isn't actually the killing of people, but it's killing the demonic tendencies that we have. The lust, the anger, the hatred, all of these things are slayed by the holy name. So Mahaprabhu, he is killing more demons than almost any incarnation, because by the spreading of this holy name, he's purifying everyone of all of the demonic qualities. So yes, Mahaprabhu is doing that. Sri Mataji.
Hare Krishna, yes. I just want to ask, so it makes sense, Krishna does anything to please his devotees. Just why does he want to please his devotees?
Yeah, so that's the on the one hand, you can say it just is how it is, but the principle is that ultimately, how do I put it? Krishna is always there by his nature, because Krishna is infinitely love and Krishna is infinitely beautiful. This is the basic foundation that we start with. Why is the absolute truth infinitely beautiful? Why is the absolute truth infinitely loving? Those sort of things, at one point, it is what it is, right? If we had a reason for that, then that reason would be supreme, not the Supreme Lord, right? So there is that, right? But once we have that, then it naturally flows that Krishna, being infinitely beautiful, right? He is sharing that beauty with his devotees. But if he is to fully taste love, to be fully loving, love is something which creates equality, right? You can see somebody you really respect, but the moment, and they might be so much higher than you in every technical sense, right? But the moment you have love and affection, I mean, how are friends like? I've never seen anyone be as mean to each other as friends are to each other, right? Because that equality gets created by the bonds of love, right? So Krishna, fully tasting that love, he gives himself to his beloved, right? To his devotees, as much as they give themselves to him, right? Because otherwise then it's not the fullness of love. It's not the fullness of love until there's that reciprocation, right? Until then there's a power imbalance, and then it's not true love. There's something else getting in the way, right? So that's why Krishna, he is controlled by his devotees, right? Yes, exactly. Alex put it wonderfully. Krishna's love is both full and overflowing simultaneously. He is so satisfied in his love, but even Krishna cannot contain the power that is love. Even Krishna has a boundary line, and it all pours out from him. And all of the jivas in the spiritual world are drowning in it. And therefore all of the great devotees, they're there and they're saying, hey, come along. This is what happens when we're doing Sankirtan, when we're going out and chanting and doing book distribution. It's not that we're preaching, we're just saying, hey, come along and drown in this ocean of love as well, right? It's pouring out, it's pouring out, it's pouring out. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he decides, we know, what does Chaitanya Mahaprabhu say? He says, I don't understand. What is this love that Srimati Radharani, she feels, right? What is this love that she feels? I don't understand it. I want to taste it, right? But what happens when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tastes it? Chaitanya Charitamrita, it has this one word, it describes Mahaprabhu as often, mattaha. He's mad, he's a madman, right? The Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is rendered mad. He is rendered completely, that same Supreme Personality who we've just discussed, who sets the foundation for the universe, right? Who all of the infinite material universes are situated upon. He is able to contain all of reality, but he is not able to contain the intensity of the love of Srimati Radharani, right? Who is transcendental love personified, right? Even he who demarcates the lines of reality cannot demarcate the lines of love. And therefore, in Krishna consciousness, we say that, well, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we say that Krishna, he is merely a student in Srimati Radharani's school of dance, right? So very rasic. This is all the stuff you can look forward to after you've all finished Srimad Bhagavatam. You can read Chaitanya Charitamrita and read this stuff every single page. But yes, so yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so yes, so everything that Krishna does is mercy, right? Even the punishment apparently is itself very merciful, because by slaying the demons as well, he is helping them out. So the primary reason, though, however, that is secondary. The primary reason is so that his devotees can see him, right? That's why Advaita Acharya, when Mahaprabhu appears, how does Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appear? Advaita Acharya calls out for him. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would not appear if Advaita Prabhu had not called out for the Supreme Lord to appear. As Srikanta Sena Prabhu mentioned earlier, Vasudev and Devaki meditating, right, on Krishna, they're longing for him to appear, and therefore he appears. As I was saying earlier, Nanda Maharaj and Mother Jashoda, they are longing for Krishna to appear, right? And therefore Krishna appears. Therefore Krishna, he is brought down by the love of his devotees. So now we've heard this answer, and there's a lot to discuss about it, and we can continue discussing more. But now we'll discuss something a little more philosophical as well. This is heavy philosophy, this section. So, but I think it's also sweet, so I enjoy it. So then 9 to 10, right? 9 is one of the memory shlokas, at least it should be. This was, I think, the second shloka I ever learned, or the third. It's one of my favorites. Janma karma cha me divyam evam yo veti tattvataha tyaktva punar janma naiti ma meti sorjuna. Maybe Nicole, would you like to read out the English?
Yeah, sorry. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna.
So here we've described the nature of Krishna, right? The knowledge of Krishna, what is it? And now we're discussing what happens if we truly understand this knowledge, right? And so all this knowledge, as you've heard, we've been able to discuss some pastimes, and we can discuss almost every pastime of Krishna in relation to this. This here is a real glorification of Krishna Katha, of hearing about the beautiful pastimes of Krishna, right? This is the result of it. We have been hearing this whole time in the Bhagavad-gītā, if you renounce the fruits of all of your activities, if you do all of these things, oh, well, maybe you can conquer lust, right? Maybe then you can be qualified to meditate. But what is the beautiful glory of just hearing about the nature of Krishna, the unborn taking birth, right? Of hearing about Krishna running around with his friends in Vrindavan, right? All of these things, what is the fruit of that? It is simply that we are able to go well beyond conquering the senses, well beyond not having any karmic reactions. We are able to go to that domain. We are able to go to that world where every step is a dance and every word is a song. That is the result of it. In the next text, Vitaraga Bhaya Krodha, right? All of these negative things, right? And we've heard how many chapters of all of this complex stuff about fruits of your action and this and that and this and that in order to conquer attachment, fear, and anger, right? Simply by hearing and understanding Krishna's pastimes, being fully absorbed in them and taking refuge in Krishna, right? All of these things are conquered. All of these problems that we've been spending all of these past few months talking about how they can be conquered through renouncing your work and doing your duty, all of them are slain simply by hearing and understanding how Krishna will get upset with his mother and cry and stamp his foot because he wants because he wants the attention, right? All of these things, they are all attained, right? So Krishna consciousness, as I said, this is the first time we just have Krishna consciousness right out in front of us. There's no, this could be Nishkama Karma Yoga, this could be Bhakti Yoga, there's none of that. Now we're hearing the full-fledged nature of what is it to be engaged in the worship and love of Krishna, right? And the results are very, very high. Everything else we've talked about comes like this with bhakti and so much more. So it's a little taste test. It's a little tester. In text 15, then we'll tangent back into the standard nature of the first few chapters. But then, but then as we get into chapter 7, we'll have more of this. So Krishna, it's almost like Krishna, he couldn't wait. He had to make it clear, right? Bhakti is so, so supreme. So like this, we hear the glories of bhakti. We hear the glories of devotion, right? Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tattvattaha. So one who understands them in truth, right? Not in untruth. And this is why, because you might wonder, well, why Doshan Krishna Prabhu? Do we have to learn about why does the Supreme Lord move and he is unborn? Why can't we just hear all of these sweet pastimes all the time, right? Because we will not know them in truth, right? As much as we will then become the sahajiyas, right, that we were discussing earlier, those who do not understand the nature of Krishna's activities. All of this complex philosophy is so important. I don't know how many of you have ever gone through Srimad Bhagavatam, but I'm sure it's frustrating, right? In the first canto, you're there and you're hearing about all of these qualities of Krishna and you're thinking, I just want to hear about Krishna's pastimes. And all the time, what does Prabhupada say, right? He says, don't go to the 10th canto, don't go to the 10th canto. And you're like, oh, but the 10th canto is where all the fun is, right? And there's always that tension, right? But in order to appreciate the 10th canto, in order to understand them tattvattaha, right, in truth, in order to understand it in truth, we have to first understand the philosophy before we can fully understand, especially the higher pastimes. We can relish the pastimes as we hear them, but to fully dive into them, we must understand the philosophy, the unmoved mover, the absolute being whose inside is the same as his outside. All of that is the canvas upon which Krishna's pastimes are painted upon. Without that canvas, all of that paint is just thrown in the air and is wasted. We must draw, we must paint the canvas of Krishna's pastimes upon all of this philosophy. So that's why when we hear the word jnana, right? Jnana is good because jnana is used in Krishna consciousness in order for us to go deeper in our Krishna consciousness. Jnana yoga, we're not so much a fan of, right? But jnana itself, knowledge itself, it is essential because it is in janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti, right? It's not just that you know it, Krishna is making it clear. Veti tattvattaha, you understand it in truth. You understand it as it absolutely is. Okay, so we'll keep on going. So then now the question might appear, right? And don't worry, we'll be discussing more about bhakti and Krishna's nature and all, and especially when we get to chapter 12, right? Then now Arjuna, he may wonder, right? Well, why is it then, if bhakti is so great, why is it then that well, if bhakti is so great and it can give you all of these things, Well, what happens then to people who approach Krishna with other attitudes, right? What happens to those who approach with different desires, right? Because what have we been discussing so far? Those who approach Krishna's pastimes with the desire to understand them in truth, with those who want to approach Krishna with all of these things. What happens to those who approach with different goals? What happens then? And then now Krishna, he speaks another very, very important text. And in fact, I'd say 11 to 14. Sometimes people include 15, but I really see 15 as like a bridging text in between this first half of the 4th chapter and then the second half. Text 11 to 14 are a real answer to this. Because Krishna now needs to say, why do I deal differently with people, but still remain the same? Because as we've said, Krishna, he is absolute. Krishna does not change, right? We are not denying the traditional ideas of God, right? We are tasting all of these very controversial sounding ideas of the God who places the feet of his devotees on his head, right? The God who even has a head, right? All of these ideas are very outrageous, but it is not that we are not outrageous. They are seemingly outrageous to the traditional person who thinks of God as just this spirit hovering in the sky or hovering outside of existence, right? But it is not that we are denying any of it. Instead, we are going deeper and deeper into it. So how then can Krishna deal differently with people while still remaining the same person, unchanging, right? This is what is answered in 11 to 14. Ye yatha mam prapadyante tam stathaiva bhajamyaham mama vartma anuvartante manushya parta sarvashaha. Maybe we can have Srinivas Prabhu, would you like to read out the English?
Yes, Prabhuji. As all surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Pratap.
So like this, Krishna, he has responded. His principle is that whoever approaches him in whatever way, in this way, he reciprocates whatever they want. So the materialist, the person who wants to enjoy this material world, right? This person who they want Ferraris, they want, I don't know, they want to be, I guess I find the epitome of it is this Joe Rogan entrepreneur culture, right? Ye average NFT collector, you know, crypto trader guy, right? I want to be rich. I want to be a successful guy. I'm going to be rich. I'm at the Sigma male grind set, right? All of these sort of guys, yeah, what do they want? They want material enjoyment. They want material pleasure, right? They want all of that, right? So Krishna says, okay, you can keep taking birth in this material world. Because what do you want? You want material joy. Well, you're not going to get much. You're not going to get much of that in the spiritual world, right? We're too busy embracing transcendental love to worry about all of your grind set entrepreneur plans, right? So people who want all of these material fruits, Krishna reciprocates that, right? He is not a God who denies one what they want. And so if somebody wants material enjoyment, well, then they get that. Like this, we hear. Then, accordingly, as we mentioned before, if the devotee approaches with love and gives himself to Krishna or herself to Krishna, well, then Krishna, much the same, gives himself to that devotee. Have I discussed how this ties into Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes already? With Mahaprabhu taking sannyas?
No.
No, I haven't. But people should want to hang with Krishna. What's that point you're making, Alex?
So, like Krishna just gives people what they want, but like, what if people, you know, they want to just become a pig and roll around in the mud or something? Clearly, it would be better to be dancing with Krishna rather than being like that.
Oh yeah, of course, and that's the whole point of the devotees, right? So in some texts, the devotees are all described as Shakti, and they're called the Kripa Shakti of Krishna. They are the mercy potency of Krishna. Gaur Govinda Maharaj, he says that when you take Krishna's mercy and you bring it into this world and you give it form, right? When all of Krishna's mercy pours out, it takes the form of the devotee, right? So it is better, but Krishna in his absolute nature, he himself does not disrupt that. He reciprocates everything, but through the mercy of his devotees, right, he disrupts those people's desires to want to be with Krishna. Does that make sense? It's the mercy of the devotees that disrupts that. Yeah, so it's not that Krishna is just leaving everyone on their own and he's just like, yeah, a rough life, right? But it's more that Krishna, he is unchanging, he is eternal, etc., 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 right? And so his devotees are where the actual ability to change the way he treats people is realized, right? Because if Krishna, because then Krishna would not be able to reciprocate with his devotee, right? He would be treating people to different standards. This is the only way by which we can have an unchanging God who treats everyone by the same standard, because it's a reciprocal one, right? However, again, that's all disrupted by the devotees. Krishna would be very cruel without the devotees, and Krishna would also not be Krishna without the devotees. Krishna is defined by he who is fully enraptured by his devotees. And that's why Krishna says, he who worships me, he who wears the shirt which says, I love Krishna, I don't know that person, that's not my devotee. But he who loves my devotees, that is my devotee.
Prabhu, I have one confusion.
Yes.
Prabhu, in text 11, in where we have the meaning explains for each word.
Yeah.
The where it says bhajami is reward. Prabhu, there's another I read where tam aham bhajami. There it is bhajami is mentioned as like worship.
Yeah.
So is this different bhajami? It could be some question, but like I don't know Sanskrit, but just
it's, how do I put it? Words can be flexible, and so they can have a variety of meaning, if that makes sense. Like if I say, yeah, the context in which it's used, a word can mean a different thing. This, how do I put it? I'm trying to think of an example of a word that changes in context.
Bhaja changes.
Pardon?
The word bhaja changes in context.
Well, the word bhaja, but I'm trying, acha in Hindi, right? Okay, so my grandma, somebody told my grandma that acha is translated as thank you, right? So when my grandma speaks English, whenever it's appropriate in like Bangla or Hindi or something to say acha, she'll say thank you. So somebody will tell her their name and she'll say, okay, thank you, like that, right? And she'll keep on going. So that's an example of if we take words too rigidly in our translation, we will miss that in context, they can mean different things, right?
Yeah. So
it's the same with bhajami. In this context, if it were to mean worship, then we would have the issue of, well, Krishna does not worship everyone, right? So clearly, contextually, it means something a little bit different, right? Yeah. And that other meaning is within the scope of meanings. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's a bit of yes, Alex, that's correct. And we're going to touch on that in the following texts. That's why the demigods come up, interestingly enough. So Krishna, he says this. One interesting point, often people will say, oh, the Bhagavad-gītā, it says all paths lead to Krishna, right? All paths lead to Krishna. There are many paths. There is a mountain and there's many paths you can walk up, but they all lead to the same destination. But this is actually nonsense. And it's not what the Bhagavad-gītā says. And I'm not saying that as a fundamentalist or anything, but simply if we look at it in the word for word, what does it say? Does it say all are on my paths? No, it's a singular. It says all are on my path. Everyone is on the path to Krishna. I'm not saying that there are those who are hell-bound and those who are going towards Krishna and those who are on Krishna's path. Everyone is on the one path to Krishna, right? It's not that no matter what you do, you will end up with Krishna, but rather it's that everyone is on the path of Krishna. And no matter who they are or what they're doing, they can either take steps towards Krishna or steps away from Krishna. That is the universal nature of the Gita. The Gita is saying that everyone is somehow relating to Krishna, right? Somehow or another. They're either walking away or they're walking towards him. But it's not some mindless pluralism that people often reduce it to, where, oh yeah, anything goes, no matter what idea you have, no matter what religious practice you have, right? No matter what, just go ahead, right? That's why Srila Prabhupada, he'll say, the bona fide religions, right? The bona fide religions are the ones which bring you closer to Krishna, right? And even then, we have to be careful that we're performing the bona fide religions bona fidely, right? So it's not that it's a everything goes pluralism, but it's not a fanatic statement either, right? Everyone is on the path to Krishna, but they're either moving towards him or away. And that's why Srila Prabhupada, he would say, yes, I think so.
Sorry, I was responding to Alex.
Oh, okay. There's, oh, yeah. I get you. And that's what Srila Prabhupada, he would say, he doesn't care what religion you are because everyone's on Krishna's path, right? He would say, all I want you to do is to love God more, right? I want you to become closer and closer to Krishna. This is the message of the Bhagavad-gītā. So I just want to clarify that because it is a very open-minded text, but it's very upsetting how many people present it today because they present it as this really empty-minded, you know, no matter what you do, you end up with God, right? I forgot the Bengali. Something like that, right? Yes. That's the one, right? No matter what, you know, just do whatever, you know, at the end of the day, it's all the same. It's all one. I remember I was talking to one Indian bodied woman, right? And so, and she was like, oh, to me, spirituality, you know, to me, my Bhagavad-gītā means we worship all the gods, right? And this is unfortunately the state of like the average person's understanding of the Gita, right? The Bhagavad-gītā is not saying that. It's not saying no matter what you do, it's all good. What it's saying is that everyone somehow or some way is reciprocating with Krishna. And our job is to go deeper into that. So it's not that some people are cut off, right? And it's not that you can say, my God, your God, right? That's what Prabhupada would always say. My God, your God. It's not that, Prabhupada has a great quote, gold is gold, right? It's not that we have Hindu gold, Muslim gold, Christian gold, right? Gold is always gold, right? But that doesn't mean fake gold is gold, right? We have to make that distinction clear. So there's many ways to understand it. You can be so pluralistic that it just becomes empty, relativism, right? Or you can be so fanatic that then you're denying the nature of the text, which is that everyone is on the path to Krishna. Okay, so we'll keep going. So then now we might wonder, right? And of course, so Krishna, he reciprocates in all different ways. To the impersonalists, it's pretty brutal. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, to the impersonalists who consider Krishna's form and activities temporary and his form to be material, which therefore is a form that gets created and destroyed, in return, Krishna, he gives them temporary material bodies and births that are created and destroyed. So those who would respond to Krishna and to see Krishna as material and simply illusionary, and that his body is just a material product, Krishna in turn, he just gives them a lot of bodies which are just material products. And so they are also forced to go through samsara, the same as the materialist. However, and I want to make this slight distinction, those are the Mayavadis, right? Those are the Mayavadis who we I don't want to say we dislike them, but we strongly dislike their ideas, right? I think, and I don't think out of a fundamentalism, right? It's just, it's a very ugly idea, right? To reduce the beauty of God to some material qualities. However, and Mrugank, I do want to write these points down, the Mayavadi versus the Brahmavadi. This is an important distinction we should have. The Mayavadi thinks that Krishna's form is just material and that Krishna's form is not eternal. However, the Brahmavadi, right? The Brahmavadi does attain impersonal realization. It is not that it is impossible. The Mayavadi tries to, but never does. Because Krishna, ye yatham mam prapadyante. Krishna's like, well, you think my body's material and doesn't have any substantial existence, so I'm going to do the same about your body. But the Brahmavadi understands Krishna's form to be transcendental, but still wishes to merge into the impersonal existence. And so understanding reality as it is, but wishing to have impersonal realization, Krishna happily reciprocates that. But why? What's your distress, Alex?
But why would you want to? Like, if you understand that Krishna and Krishna,
yeah. I don't know either, but they exist. It's described that they exist, right? So we've got to deal with them. And there are some people, you'll find people in history who think that way. I don't understand why either. Like, and I'm happy that that's a very devotional response. Like, why would you make that call, right? But they do, right? And that's their call to make. But yeah, it's very weird. I also don't understand the Brahmavadi's psychology, but it is what it is, right? So in this way, right, we find Krishna, he is reciprocating with all sorts of people. Okay, if someone ever says all paths lead to the same goal, what is the goal? Then try to answer this one. Yes, exactly. So then, okay, in the last few minutes, I'm just going to touch on the finishing point of this. I was hoping to finish the whole 4th chapter and I still haven't gotten halfway. Anyways, as I said earlier, I'm happy to go slow in this section. Chapter 5, we will rush, kind of like how we rushed parts of chapter 3 to stay on topic, because I think this part is more important than some of the other parts we'll discuss. So we might then wonder, right? So if worshipping Krishna, one is awarded by whatever he wants, why do people worship others with material desires? This is the question that might be said, right? If this is the case, right? Whoever reciprocates with Krishna, they get whatever in response. Why are there people who worship anything else, right? And even though text 12, when we discuss it, even though it's going to discuss demigods, I want to expand that out, right? Because culturally, we have many people we see as demigods today, right? Even if they aren't the devas, right? We might think, well, I'm not in a context where there's a lot of demigod worship, right? There's not a lot of people worshiping Indra where I am. But how many people worship so many personalities with a big karmic bank account, right? How many celebrities, right? In a weird way, they form the role of demigods in today's society. Because a demigod is just somebody with a lot of pious karma, right? And they're able to be born as one of the angelic beings in the heavenly planets, right? But because society is so degraded, we don't even think about the heavenly planets anymore. We just think about those with a big karmic bank account in this world, right? Jeff Bezos, right? Or Elon Musk. Like, it's the cringiest thing how people look up to Elon Musk, right? It makes me cringe and cringe and cringe. It's like, whoa, he's so cool with all of his millions and millions of dollars. Wow, and that's a demigod today, right? So people, they look up to all sorts of those sort of things. And why so? Kankshanta karmanam siddhim yajanta iha devataha shipram hi manushe loke siddhir bhavati karmaja. Men in this world desire success in fruitive activities, and therefore they worship the demigods. Quickly, of course, men get results from fruitive work in this world. Shipram, this is the essential point, right? Why do people worship demigods instead of Krishna if this is the case, right? These days, it's because they don't know any better, right? But traditionally, this always happened. And the reason why is coming back to the point Alex said, and I'm going to conclude on this point. The homework is to finish the 5th chapter, if you haven't already. Because Krishna, he will give you what you want, but he'll also purify you beforehand. Krishna will also want to purify you because Krishna will take, no matter how low your desire is, he'll reciprocate it, but he'll still try and do it in a productive manner. So Krishna, yeah, he'll give you what you want, but he'll do it in a way where he'll give you it after purifying you, right? And we have so many examples from the Vedic literature of this, right? But the demigods, they'll just give it to you quickly, right? So those people who are so much wanting material things, they go after the demigods. demigods. They don't get it from Krishna, right? If those demigods are the demigods they give sacrifices to, or even if we think of the demigods today, you know, all of these business models get rich quick. There's a reason why, right? People are like, whoa, you know, again, like not to pick on the entrepreneur sort of culture. I just find that one the most cringe, but they're all cringe, but I just feel like it's a good example, which stands out, right? Everyone's like, whoa, you know, look at all of these tips he did to get rich. This is the way that I can get rich, right? And that's why they worship these people. They look up to them because this is the way where I can get my fruit of rewards quickly. You know, I'll have whatever, right? I'll have all of these material fruits so quickly, and they don't care, right? About purifying you beforehand. And again, the same with the demigods, right? If you go to Indra and you say, hey, Indra, you know, I want X, Y, Z, he's not going to think, well, I want to make you a pure devotee, because at the end of the day, the demigods, even though they're in the mode of goodness, they're still materialists, the majority of them. They're just materialists who went around it the most religious way, but they're still materialists, right? And so, don't get me wrong, many are great devotees, and I'm not going to blaspheme. I'm not saying anything bad about the demigods, but in many cases, you don't get that position by being a full-fledged, pure Shuddha Bhakta, right? Yeah. So then, yes, Alex, that's a good example, right? George Harrison really helped launch preaching, and Srila Prabhupada would say this, right? George Harrison, you're doing such a good job preaching, because he was seen as one of the demigods, right? And he did a good job by showing, actually, you know, chanting Hare Krishna. That's what it's at, right? That's where it's at. That's where the real riches are, right? And so a lot of people, again, this is the glories of the devotee, right? Although George Harrison, he got a little wavy after Srila Prabhupada left, towards the end of his life, he became solid in his Krishna consciousness again. But Krishna, what will he do? Whatever you want, whatever you approach him with, he will purify you until you don't want it anymore, right? By the time you get it, you don't want it anymore. Prabhupada would always joke. Srila Prabhupada, when he was a grihastha, right? When he was working as a pharmacist, right? He struggled with business a lot, right? He would struggle to make ends meet, right? But then when Srila Prabhupada took sannyas and he renounced all material benefits, he became one of the richest people on earth, because in his name, all the ISKCON temples were there. So all of the millions and millions of dollars worth of temples were all in his name. And he would laugh about it, right? I struggled so much when I wanted the money to live my life. And now that I can't use any of it, right? Now that I don't need any money, because I just live with, I live with these robes and a watch, right? Now suddenly I have so much money, right? This is Krishna, right? This is how Krishna reciprocates. Of course, Srila Prabhupada never had any material desires, but this is an example of how Krishna likes to act, right? We know the same example with Dhruva Maharaj, right? Dhruva Maharaj is a little boy, and he goes out. I won't say the whole pastimes, we don't have the time, but he goes out and he meditates. And what does he want? He wants his father's throne. He wants a throne greater than his father's throne. And he meditates and does all of these things, meditating on the Supreme Lord. And when the Supreme Lord appears, finally, he sees him and he thinks, how beautiful is this transcendental Lord, and how worthless is all the material things that I was hankering for. I wanted a piece of glass, but instead the Supreme Lord showed me what a diamond is, right? This is what Krishna does. Krishna purifies you of all of your material desire. And therefore, and then he might give you what you want, but at that point it's too late. You don't want anything else, you just want Krishna. And that's why people turn to the demigods. They don't want to be purified, or they can't be bothered to go through that long process quickly and rapidly. Anyways, I've gone a little bit over time. My sincere apologies. We will conclude chapter 4 for sure next week, and we will begin chapter 5 next week. And we'll actually have activities again. I'm sorry, I just keep on forgetting how dense this section is. So I have the activities for the second half of the 4th chapter. So yeah, you won't be bored by me just monologuing to you guys for 2 hours nonstop. Okay. I think I already set the homework to finish the 5th chapter, didn't I? If that's already been the homework, I don't want you to start chapter 6. So let me think. You know what? No homework. Oh, actually, homework is, and this will be related to our activity, so it's actually relevant. I totally take back no homework. This will be related to next week's activity. Try to structure out the flow of chapter 4. So you can read through text only. Oh wait, last week I said 1 to 15. Oh, then finish chapter 5. Then finish chapter 5 if that was the case. Vidhi Mataji, you raised your hand.
Sorry, probably a little off context again. I was just thinking about the exams that we have. So just one request, if you can give us just a heads up of like 2 weeks before any exam.
Oh, 100%. That date I sent in the group chat, it'll probably be a week after that date, but I'll give you a heads up, and I'll make sure our activity for the last week before the test will be, we can just go through all the questions in little groups, like little study groups.
That'll be fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Don't stress about the test. I said at the beginning, Purna Chandra Goswami says, devotees are often disappointed by how easy the test is. So yeah, don't worry too much. So finish chapter 5 is the homework. And as Srikanta Sena Prabhu said, please also do the flow. No need to do it in depth. Just get the flow for chapter 4 because it's going to tie into the activity next week. So just read over it. You can read over it per, text only. Normally I don't recommend that, but because we've already read through it with purports, read through it with text only and try and get a flow of the themes and ideas, because chapter 4 doesn't have a very obvious structure to it. So yeah, please wrestle around with that. Okay, are there any questions? Otherwise I'll get around to the question Alex asked earlier.
Prabhuji, will the shloka test be on a different day?
Yes, so the shloka test, I'm thinking the shloka test I will do in the week following your closed book exam.
Okay.
I want to give you guys as much time as possible to learn the shlokas this time around. Next time, the shloka test will come before the closed book exam, but just because everyone's nervous for their first shloka test, the shloka test will be after the closed book exam.
So that will be the memorizing of the shlokas and the meaning of it as well, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, you have to give the meaning. I'm not too strict on getting it perfect word for word, yeah. But get the rough idea down at least, right? Don't say, you know, Janma karma cha me divyam, and say, you know, I don't know, whoever approaches me, I reciprocate accordingly, right? Like nothing like that. But as long as you get the rough vibe, like I'm down, right? And technically, because it is a pass-fail thing, technically you could say only the Sanskrit and fail all of the English meanings and still pass, but then you'd have to get 100% of the Sanskrit. So so yeah, don't put that pressure on yourself. And yeah, okay, and also it's better to memorize English. I often find this with Bhakti-śāstrī. The tests are so easy; they're designed really for you to pass. But you really get a lot out of Bhakti-śāstrī when you think about how much you can use this, you know, later on, right? All of the content as well. I was thinking about that when we were going through content. So much of it is well beyond what you'll need for the test. But this is all stuff you can use when you're giving Bhagavatam class, when you're speaking to people about Bhagavad-gītā. That's where the real sort of, yeah, in my opinion, they should make the tests harder, but I'm not the one making the tests. So I still think there's so much in the Bhagavad-gītā and so much understanding this for personal benefit and for your later benefit. So yeah. Not that I don't think you're doing that. I'm just reiterating that point, right? And so a lot of stuff we mentioned, especially the philosophy, really trying to understand it. That's my issue with the. Oh, and by the way, you're free to leave. I'm just critiquing Bhakti-śāstrī culture right now. But oh yeah, can't wait for Alex's question. It's going to be juicy. Yeah. I find with Bhakti-śāstrī often it gets treated as you go in, you memorize a few facts. You say those facts and then you're done. The only time you're really thinking about the philosophy is the open book exam, which is why it's my favorite one. But I really think for the goal of Bhakti-śāstrī, we should really be thinking creatively, like thinking, how does this all work? You know, how does this tie in? Trying to understand how it all connects. Because that's where the real nectar is, right? No offense to the Mahajans, but reciting all of the Mahajans, I don't think is as spiritually nourishing as understanding how bhakti fits in relation to all of the yoga processes, if you get what I mean, right? So yeah, again, that's not that wasn't targeted to you at all. Like I'm just tangenting off to say that's just something I've been thinking of recently. Like a lot of the Bhakti-śāstrī value, I think, comes out of stuff that's not in the exams. yeah, the open book questions I think are great. Yeah. The exams and shlokas we need to know are just for chapters 1 to 6. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Don't worry. That'd be pretty cruel if I asked you on chapter 18. Maybe I will one day. No. But yeah, no. Yeah. Please list all. Yeah. I'll ask you to list every Manu's name. No. So yeah. But all that said, yeah, I think really the best benefit you could get out of Bhakti-śāstrī, I reckon, from the handbook is to just read all of the open book questions and just think how you'd answer them. Because I really, really like that. They're my favorite part of the whole thing. So yeah. Okay. So Alex's question was regarding like how people will get like, yeah, you're gonna upset. Well, there's 2 aspects to it. One aspect is like, as harsh as it sounds, like where we shouldn't go out of our way to upset anyone, but we don't really dictate our philosophy on who we're upsetting, right? for the first thing, right? And I don't think it's particularly egregiously offensive what we're saying either, right? Like they'll have some theological issues with it maybe, but I don't think saying, oh yeah, we acknowledge, you know, I don't think we're saying we acknowledge these personalities as being empowered. I don't think that's a real spit in the face, right? And it's not like compared to what a lot of, you know, like you hear an evangelical speak and they'll say, you know, Joseph Smith, the Prophet Muhammad, all of them, they were just speaking to demons and stuff like that, right? If we're existing in that same framework, I think relatively we're far better, right? We're fully acknowledging the spiritual value of all of them, right? But I also think it's focusing in on a different aspect, right? So for example, when a Muslim is discussing the Prophet Muhammad, right, they're speaking about prophethood, they've got this whole framework of what a prophet is, right? When a Christian speaks then about Jesus being God, right, they're speaking about a different sort of framework, right? So all that the Shaktivesh Avatar sort of thing is it's a different framework for understanding these things, right? It's a different framework for understanding how does God specifically have people speak for him, right? And in what role does divinity play in that, right? So both of the way that the Muslim approach is that it really emphasizes the Jiva aspect, right? It's really trying to make clear that yes, Krishna, Krishna does empower personalities, right, to speak for him, right? And that's why, and so there's a huge emphasis on that in standard Muslim theology, but not in all Muslim theology, right? You'll find a lot of Muslims who start playing around with ideas that there is this, especially Sufis, like they'll start talking about how there is a certain divinity that's present in Muhammad, right? There is a way that there is both divine and, if you get what I mean, there's both divine energy and the human or person, Jiva aspect, right? And we find the same thing with Christianity, right? So it's just a different way of wrestling with this tension that when somebody speaks for God and clearly is empowered by God, there is an aspect of God present in them, right? And on the other hand, they are still persons and not Krishna himself, right? So they're just these different frameworks for identifying that. That they can be put on the same list is because the way that we're sort of breaking down the issue is one where they can be put in the same category. But I don't think it necessarily has to be the case that they are absolutely the exact same position, spiritually speaking, right? It could be that they are in different spiritual positions as individuals, but it's just that they are within the same umbrella category because that's the category we have for understanding how God does speak with, you know, how God does represent himself through jivas. Does that come to your question, or did I miss it?
Yeah, it helps a lot. I still just wonder, like, if I was going to go to Lewisham Latin Mass and try to preach Krishna and all that. Yeah. And like, it'd just be tricky because they're all Chalcedonian. Or if I went to the mosque at Auburn, and then after Salat, like, tried to preach Krishna, it'd just be tricky because, like, the mainstream Muslims, they say, you know, Muhammad's just a prophet, Jesus is just a prophet. The mainstream Christians, they say Jesus is God, and so, like, I get how, like, this system, the way we've framed it today, it's coherent and it's consistent, but it's tricky to get that through to someone, like, in those other camps.
Well, I think the way that I normally do it when I'm discussing is I'll sort of like say, I won't change the idea, but I'll very much use their language so that they're not thrown off. So I'd actually change the way that I represent the same idea depending on the context, right? So when in like a Christian context, I really emphasize the idea that, you know, the Shaktivesh means that there's divinity there, right? And there's divinity along with humanity alongside, and that's something that really gets in a Christian context will get people going, right? Whereas in a more Muslim context, I would emphasize more that, you know, still nevertheless the Jiva is there and it is not Krishna, right? So and those are still aspects, and I haven't changed the philosophy at all. But I think that's just sort of one thing where you have to be conscious of the way you're using language. Like Prabhupada will say apparently contradictory things, but he's actually saying the same philosophy the whole time, but he's just changing it based on the mindset of the person he's talking to, if that makes sense.
So yeah, and that's the second part of that would be, if say it's you, a super devout Catholic and a super devout Muslim in the same room talking about this stuff, you want to talk to both of them at the same time, and that's where the tricky part comes in, because you have to either say Muhammad is just a prophet or he's God, or Jesus is just a prophet or he's God, and at that point you have to pick. And then at that point, I think at that point you're just in a rough spot and you just got to go out all guns blazing and just commit to it. I reckon. There's only so, you know what I mean. There's only so much that you can. At that point, I'll just articulate why I don't think what I'm saying is really. It really should be a big issue for either of them, right? But then at that point, you're just you know, you're in a difficult spot. You know, I think at one point, the philosophy is never there to be changed, but it's always flexible in how it's presented. Again, that's the magic of the parampara. I'm sure you've all had enough of me talking about the parampara after the 2-3 hours or so we've gone through it so far. But that is the magic of it, right? It's the whole idea is that it's looking forward as much as it's looking backwards, right? So we're looking forward. How does this move through reality? Krishna consciousness as it's practiced today is very, very different, but it's also the exact same. So all I'm saying is there's definitely a precedence to present it differently, but you're still presenting the same thing. But when you're in a difficult situation, you can either sit down and really think how you could balance those two, or you can just think, okay, look, this is too difficult. I'm going to go out. I think both are valid, but I think, the harder the situation, the more creatively you have to think. And Prabhupada himself would say this. He'd say, this is very good. You're thinking creatively of how to share this Krishna consciousness. This is what the Krishna consciousness mission is about. We should be.
Sometimes you might need a softener. Like Prabhupada used the softeners. Yeah, like the kirtan or prasadam to get them in the spiritual zone of understanding what you're going to say.
Prasadam resolves all theological controversies.
Well, that's what I always like to say. No matter how much I disagree with someone, when we're in the kirtan, we're all dancing to the same tune. So it's this wonderful moment of unity. You know what I mean? And then in that moment of unity, then suddenly those disagreements feel a whole lot smaller. You know what I mean? And there's also one aspect where it's like at one point it's not really my responsibility to change somebody's mind, right? If you get what I mean, like if somebody is really just committed to like, look, that makes no sense, you're not reconciling anything, it's like, okay, Hare Krishna, you know what I mean? Please feel free to keep attending our kirtans and having prasadam, you know what I mean? Like it's not like Krishna consciousness is not necessarily about stamping out every other philosophy on earth. It's about sharing the beauty of Krishna. And to a degree that requires sharing some philosophy, but not everyone's going to want all of Krishna at once, right? So I don't think there's a major issue with saying, okay, yeah, whatever, right? You think this or you think that, but Krishna is still pretty amazing, right? Krishna still is XYZ, right? I don't think somebody needs to fully be strong-armed into the Shaktivesh understanding in order to get some initial moments of appreciating Krishna, if that makes sense. While that's something that's important, I'm not saying philosophy doesn't matter, but I think I told you all this one time when I brought one of my really I wouldn't say devout, but he's firmly a Muslim and he's firmly believing, you know, Orthodox Islam, and I brought him to the temple and for the 50th anniversary, and he had a fun time, like he danced in the kirtan and everything, right? And at the end, Nrsimha Kavach Prabhu, who was with me, right? I told him about it, and Nrsimha Kavach Prabhu said, "Oh, what did he say?" And I said, "Oh yeah, you know, he said he really enjoyed it and stuff like that, right?" And then I was expecting Nrsimha Kavach Prabhu to be like, "Oh yeah, now you're gonna make sure, you know, make sure he's got the right understanding. Even though I knew that's not what he would say, still you have that gut feeling because we're so used to that, right? We're so obsessed with having everyone understand things the way we do, right? But all he said was he said so he appreciated it, he enjoyed it, and I said yes. And then Nrsimha Kavachya said, well, what more can we want, right? So yeah, I think there's a certain aspect of that, right? Yeah, there's a certain, it's not my responsibility necessarily to have everyone fully agree with everything. There's always going to be diversity. And that's, if you can say, the whole point of the Bhagavad-gītā. There's all this diversity, but we can be confident that if it's sincerely done, it eventually leads you all the way to Krishna, right? I have no doubt, and Prabhupada himself would say this, I have no doubt that a devout Christian or a devout Muslim who would just really struggle with that, eventually through executing their spiritual program, right, will eventually warm up to it, right? Because they're all empowered by Krishna, right? Does that make sense? Yeah. Are there any follow-up questions?
I think that's a really good answer. Like, I really liked how you said that there's a certain amount of Krishna, a certain amount of Jiva, and then, yeah, like different people emphasize a different aspect. I think that was such a good answer.
Yeah, no, that because it's interesting. It's also hard to understand. So I think the other trick is you can just confuse them enough that they don't know if they disagree or not. Yeah. Okay, if there's nothing else, like, it's a big topic, we can talk about it for hours, but I think that's sort of addressed a bit of it. Yeah, okay, well, let's wrap it up then. I'll see you all next week, and we will begin to have activities again. I just apologize, like, this first half of chapter 4 is so like rich that I just didn't expect us to take like 3 times longer than I thought we would, but we'll finish chapter 4 next week. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.